If you're not doing something, if you're not for the cause, if you're not part of the cure, then you are part of the problem. And that actually means sitting still on every level. Even if you've joined this group and given $100 here and you're sitting still doing nothing else, I'm involved. Well, not really. And that's exactly what the government want. The government want you sitting still, being quiet, and then complying to look after yourself. That's all they actually want out of you. Because once they've got you there, they'll take the next bit. The next slice is coming. It's just around the corner, and they'll end up where you either give up or they legally take all your firearms away. That's the plan. Please stop thinking otherwise. And then for everyone else that goes, oh, I don't care about the firearms, why do you think they're taking the firearms? Why do you think they're taking the firearms? This is about you too. G'day folks, Mark here again. I want to have a bit of a chat today about what you can do, what you should be doing in the world that we live in right now. What's actually happening? The government positioning to disarm the civilians of Australia. A long-term plan, something that's been building up step by step. They call it a death of 1,000 cuts. It's actually a few well-chosen incidents that cause the crises that end up where they're going to take all the firearms away. And most people aren't really aware of that situation. They put it down to some form or other of dismissing it, get confused in the subterfuge that's here. But there is a plan, and I hope people are waking up to some degree or another. We just had obviously the Bondi massacre, the shooting at Bondi. And if no other proof is needed, the absolute first cab off the rank were pre-organised, ready to go gun reforms, which were the first thing there. So whether by circumstance, whether by coincidence, whether by design, they were the thing that was happening at the very specific timing needed to do what they needed to do to try and ram things through. So I could go on a lot about it. A lot of people are going to talk about the fact that's not to do, it's to do with whether it is anti-Semitism, whether it is the Islamophobia, whether it's to do with the UN, whether it's to do with China. It really doesn't matter. It comes down to a government are doing things against the will of the people in multiple fashions. They use propaganda to convince enough of the Australians, enough of the population to make it seem less negative what they're actually doing, and then time it around the likes of something like this, a massacre where something terrible's happened, and then it all fits into okay. But it is, as I said, if nothing else, by the nature of what the first cab off the rank was, what they actually attacked to start off with, while ignoring every other problem. And I will get into a little bit more of that. The problems they're now focusing on aren't necessarily constructive either. But it is something they've been onto. Most people have woken up to that in the firearms community. A lot don't want to be called a tin hat wearing conspiracy theorists, so they will tend to just be going with the flow. But that's part of what the plan is. And to be truthful, that's exactly what the government would like you to do right now. Shut up, comply, and move on. Be distracted by the other things. Be distracted by Venezuela, or be distracted by we're not having the Royal Commission, so and really we're ignoring the Islamophobia that's in the country, or the anti-Semitism that's in the country. They focus on something else, and don't worry about that. You just comply and you'll be okay. And I can tell you from first-hand experience, there is too much, a vast majority of our firearms community, that as much as they have had to feel like criminals have been sent text messages directly from the police force on Christmas, just before Christmas Day. This happened to us just a year ago in Australia. There's all sorts of pressure that comes with it. When it comes down to it, the way too many of us in the firearms community deal with it is by just complying. And if I just comply hard enough, then it'll be okay and I can carry on my life and I don't need to worry about it. And that is, so then you go quiet and then they've got what they want. And people also foolishly think, because they haven't read the laws properly, they don't realise that what they have accepted in, and I shouldn't say accepted because it's not as simple as that, what got forced on top of us all was laws that are going to take all the firearms. They're set up in that place. They just need it to calm down a little bit and take another step to get to that place, and they will all be gone. And people think that is me being hyperbolic or me overstating the situation. I'm not. I've read the laws, and I've also can pay attention. It is not complicated, this step-by-step process. Whether it's 2 years or it's 10 years, that's the ultimate plan. I've explained reasons why they would do that. There is obviously, it is very simple to step back and look at it and say, well, it should be very simple to step back and look and say, why do they need to remove the gun so badly? And yes, you can come into the police forces tend to naturally want to protect themselves, but no, that doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't cut the mustard. It comes down to a government that wants more and more control and doesn't want any dissent from government, from the population. And then you can see this picture. And surely now there's a lot more of woken up can see that, which I'm also trying to speak to everybody else, the four-wheel drivers, the campers, the fishermen, the farmers, actually the daycare centre workers, the you name it. Stop and have a look what's just happened. We now have police officers roaming the streets with what the media and that side of this world calls assault rifles. Those are the rifles to cause multiple deaths, where they carry 30 rounds in a magazine, and no one's allowed to have them because they're such terrible rifles, such terrible things to happen. Oh no, well they've fixed that. They call them long arms when the media talk about the police carrying those firearms around. Now, assault rifle isn't a proper term by any means. What they're carrying around is a model of an AR-15, which is the rifle they're talking about, which that's only in our regular untrained police officers carry those around. It's once you go into our trained, our TRGs and our more tactical response groups, that sort of stuff, the trained side of it, well, they go to the full weapons of war. They go to what the other side would call either a weapon of war or a machine gun. What they actually have is an M4 with select fire. So it has an automatic, semi-automatic and automatic rifle is what those guys carry around. So this is okay with everyone somehow or other, that they can now be roaming the streets in our once peaceful Australia. While we are flat out trying to disarm our population, we are flat out over-arming our police force. I see an issue with that. Surely some other people are starting to wake up to that. But we also have to understand they're also trying to shut down social media, use as much as they can with either digital ID or with tracking, and trying to get to where you have to so everything can be tracked, everything can be held accountable to. Then they'll come knocking on your door, as is already starting to happen in Australia for social media posts that they disapprove of. Termed hate speech, or now maybe termed anti-Semitism, or maybe Islamophobia, or whatever it is, we will control you. In other words, shut up and comply. We'll do the same thing when it comes to protest. Laws come in, although we would tend to see already there's been some protests that obviously suited the government and they were fine, but laws come in New South Wales where you can't protest. It will be interesting to see if there is the firearms community or the Freedom Australia community that are prepared to actually test that, because it'll be interesting to see what happens if we let the people that the government like listening to that actually cause more division in our country, but they pretend it's under the term of inclusion. Be interesting to see if what actually happens with what the police actually want to stop there. So it really is, be quiet, don't talk, don't complain, and we'll disarm you to make sure that very thoroughly. These are very simple simple things that all over the world, history has repeated time after time after time of dark times are coming. And that's the simple thing. Dark times are coming. A bit of that comes from the good times create weak men. Weak men create bad times, and then it's the bad times is where you get strong men. So unfortunately, we're at the end of the good times and weak men phase. So hopefully, it would be really nice to think that we're not all weak men, that people can stand up and do the right thing and start to push back and work out ways to, whether it's a form of civil unrest or civil disobedience, in the form of trying to stay in, at this stage, we're still in the good times, trying to stay in the brackets of where we're not getting arrested. But in truthful, there is a level of where if you're not prepared to push back now and bring a little bit of control, then those really dark times are coming. And they're not nice. No one wants to go there. And maybe we have to. Maybe the government's going to force it. Maybe the people have to go there before they'll have to be forced to their knees, and they'll have to lose lives before they actually understand we've got to push back. So that's obviously very dark times and very gloomy sort of conversation, but look around the world and read a history book. You'll find out that's the normal thing. So how could we possibly stop that in between? And I suppose, and try and turn it around in a world that is sort of waking up. There are countries that have gone a lot lower than what Australia is and are starting to pull themselves back up. That's starting to happen. So they've gone through that curve, and they've had the deaths, and they've had the bad times, and they've had the starvation, and they've had all those things, and they're coming the other side of it. Generally, yes, that socialism is what's forced that, and generally that's totally where our ex-Communist Party Prime Minister, and yes, if you didn't know, that's what he was, but the socialist side of things, and you'll go into lots of other bits and pieces I could put into that. I'm not going to fill it up with semantics, but that is part of the process that's in play here. It's called cultural Marxism, is what our country's going to some degree or another, ways to break our society down, which is what we see. So I won't get too much more into that, but that is the framing of things as where we're actually at if you stop and pay attention. What can we do? Well, what we found over here in Western Australia, and we didn't do it really well in Western Australia. It's still in process of trying to find a way forward. We're a little bit on the long haul now because it's the next election cycle is when we can really get something possibly done. But that goes through keeping everything on their toes, keeping them on their toes in some form or other. Hopefully there's enough West Australians that are still awake to the fact this isn't over, that we can keep pushing, and certainly what I'm going to try and encourage. And those things come into things I've spoken about many times of what should we be doing. Well, I suppose, first of all, thinking that one thing is going to save you, something is going to come and save you, some organisation is going to save you, regardless of what they promise or they suggest and they come up with a plan, that doesn't work. We've seen that happen over here. I'll say something out loud, I've been holding back saying a long time, but over here, the SSAA were not part of the cure. Not by any means. And maybe, and I don't want to say they were deliberately or malicious in what they did, but lots of the things they did ended up being very destructive. They made it worse for our cause. I presume they were in the process of, listen, there is a conflict of interest, a business, that a not-for-profit organisation which it's full of so many good people, so many good volunteers, so many people put so much hard work in, but the hierarchy are a little different. They are, and maybe think they're doing the best thing for all shooters while positioning themselves to get the best out of this situation, but by being the only people at the table for a lot of the conversations prior and during and after the gun laws that came into Western Australia, by sharing very, very little of that. Everything was a surprise. It was all someone else's fault. Every little structure that went forward, they took claim for. Or every other thing that tried to happen, from protests to e-petitions, that sort of stuff, they actively did not support. In some cases told people, no, if you're going there, you'd better take your colours off. We can't be involved with this. They really didn't step up for the shooter. So I'm not going to try and say that's malicious. I would say that I would hope that it was nothing more than naivety with a little bit of trying to position SSAA shooters a little better. $20 million a year income, at least that organisation, so positioning their 250,000 shooters in a better place. Okay, there's some logic to that, and you'd have to forgive them for that. But the deliberately resisting what the rest of the community was trying to do and keeping everyone else in the dark, along with no constitution anyone can read in the organisation, the majority of the financials of around Australia are not disclosed. The last AGM in Western Australia, you had to sign a non-disclosure agreement to go to. These are really bad, smelly things, and anyone with an objective brain has to be pretty negative about that. My hope is a little bit of self-protection, a little bit of naivety, complicated times, made some poor decisions. And my hope would be they've learned from that, and particularly nationally can step up and be part of the fight, which means get involved and help and actually do something, not talk about this behind the scenes rubbish, where it's all happening behind the scenes, but we never know what's going to happen next, and it's always a surprise, and oh, coincidentally we've got more members and we're positioning out. Now, I won't get too negative. A lot of people are very negative there. They have just reasons for it. It was something that didn't go well in Western Australia. I hope they in Western Australia can see that and would like to change it, and I hope nationally we can go forward in different places. The other thing that happens is politicians, particularly politicians in the opposition, that talk tough. It's really easy for a politician to talk tough in the opposition. It's sort of, they are after your vote. In my opinion, unless they are pledging in writing to do something about it if they get into power, then it's just rhetoric. They just want your vote. Once they're in there, well, then they'll go with whatever suits them best also. And we certainly have seen some really good voices. We didn't really get to put it to test much, but it definitely is a case of there's never been that. If we get into power, we are going to move to repeal these laws. No. There's a case of they're bad laws and they shouldn't do this, but not pushing too far, not going past that level. So if certainly in a political party, there is, be aware of what's actually happening and listen to the larger, I suppose, story, the larger explanation of what's going on. Siding with one bit of politics and putting all your weight into that bit to try and make it work, if they're only using you, their only way of getting in is using the shooting population to get into power, it's not going to work. You don't have the numbers. So that isn't all the political party's fault, but I would say any of them that are going on about how they're going to support you, how this is bad, and listen, they're on your side, unless it's in writing, unless it's a pledge in writing about what they're going to do, it's take it with a grain of salt to start off with. Other organisations and this moves into the other bits and pieces, whether it's fundraisers or it's joining an organisation, all that sort of stuff. Listen, it's something to be listened to, I would say, in all these things. And I should go back to be it being a member of SSAA, or be it being enrolling with a political group, listing with an organisation, any of those things. They're all very good things to do. Just don't put all your eggs into that basket. And don't think that, listen, I've done this, so I'm done enough. You know, I'm part of the fight because I joined them. I gave them $100, or I gave them $200, or I signed up a member here and I've done my thing because I did this thing and I'm part of the fight. No, you're not. Listen, it's not a negative thing, but you're not part of the fight. That's one of the things that we really found. Too many people were doing too little. That's the whole thing. You need to be actively involved. And yes, that's hard and you're busy. I got it. This is for your kids, this is for your kids' kids, and this is for their kids' kids. You don't want a 30-year cycle, because that's where it goes if they keep getting their way. We are in a position where with our federal government, and in Western Australia, our state government, in other states, okay, you're about to have a little bit more of a choice, but where they have a whole lot of time to do irreparable damage, and that is the plan. Don't get me wrong, in one little bit, that is the plan, to change our society, to change our country into something else. And yes, that's about mass immigration, and yes, that's about keeping up the division in our country. That's about all these horrible road laws, all these horrible fishing laws, all these farming, all these changing laws. Don't ask the people, just change the laws and they will go quiet. Well, that's our problem. We go quiet, we're not working together. But yeah, all these things, and that's including disarm the population. Like I said, don't let them complain. Make them go quiet, start talking together and be able to protest in any fashion, and disarm them. This is 101, how you control a society. And yes, that's what they're up to. And I suppose I'll get back onto the positive things that you can do by doing things. And that does mean protesting in places. That does mean writing articles to get into the media, the mainstream, but the free mainstream media, or ultimately into the mainstream media, articles that are tactically written, where it isn't about, oh, I don't want my guns taken away. That's a really poor argument. That you've got 98% of the society that has been largely either indifferent or they think you shouldn't have firearms anyway. They've been propagandized into a place where you're a bad guy because you got guns. That's not a grey area, you know that. So stories that talk about the other issues attached to with guns being part of the conversation. The stories that talk about the feral problems that we have in places because of the laws that have come here. The stories that talk about, and this can move into self-defense, this can move into all sorts of things. A lot smarter people than me are going to be able to go through and set up stuff where it can get in there and it just starts to change the narrative a little bit. I've spoken about many times before about positive advertising and about putting aside the good side of guns. When it comes down to it, even that, if it's too much on guns, you lose 98%. You're only talking to the choir. Or you'll give an ammunition for the people that those guys will do a positive thing of how a great shoot they went out onto, and they, getting rid of pigs or whatever the hunt was, that sort of stuff, and a great thing there. And they put forward the joy of that sort of stuff. Now, you and I understand the joy of that hunt is getting something really difficult done, getting something really challenging, getting it done. That's a really positive thing. Unfortunately, that same positive thing you're putting forward to the people who see it in a different fashion, then that is glee in the horror of killing, of murdering an animal. So, okay, I get that's a ridiculous perspective, but it is a perspective and it is very easily used against us. So no, that's not a constructive thing. The rest of it, of the putting forward the challenge, okay, fine, but that bit there is something to be very careful about sharing. And I would suggest not sharing. We're not in that environment anymore. You do have to adapt to your environment. It might have been desert and you're wearing your desert tan, your desert clothes out and that sort of stuff. Now you're in the jungle. You're sticking out like, dogs, the proverbial. So adapt that sort of stuff. But in actual fact, the positive thing is showing, as I mentioned before, what this actually is about is it is a threat. What's coming is trying to destroy all of our culture, trying to take it all away. So putting forward the fall drive and the camping, the fishing, the things that people want to come and do, and just a little bit, just a few seconds of firearms involved in that situation to normalize them and bring them back into that same place. The same sort of story can happen with the letters to, whether it's magazines but you want to be in the mainstream, but you want to be not just talking to the choir. There's no point being really positive all about each other like we always have and not sharing with the people who are drinking their cafe lattes in the middle of Sydney. There is places where to need to share it to a place and grow our culture or sell our culture to ourselves and to the people that consider themselves Australians. And yes, we're not going to get all the people by any means, but you only need to move a small percentage. You take our 98% to the 89% of people that are against. That's all of a sudden a big shift, and that does matter. That is what we need to do, grow our population so we have more weight in things. There's things like the lobby group that are coming up, and they'll have the Australian lobby side of things. So, and there's stuff to check out online, the Australian lobby group. I'm a little bit in two minds. I see this tactic to go with it, where you've got our government is bought and sold. I think it's a horrible way of politics. I think it's something we should abolish altogether, but equally, it's what's going on out there. So actually bringing up a lobby group that is about Australians, that makes some sense to it. So another way to go forward, like I said, with politicians and writing to politicians, e-petitions, all that sort of stuff, and writing submissions and that sort of thing. Yes, it's a positive thing to be doing. Writing a politician, whether someone puts up an e-petition, being part of that, all those bits and pieces are positive things. I will reiterate, but they're worth absolutely nothing unless everything is happening. One of the most important things we see out of all this is it has to be coming from everywhere. This includes the legal side of things. And a lot of people think, well, okay, we're going to get illegal. There's a couple of legal things that I've heard about. So very much, if they need funds to help them, that sort of stuff, they get on board with them, be part of that, write a signature and promote them, all the bits and pieces, absolutely. But do not consider any of this is going to work by itself. That's the main thing I would say above all this sort of stuff. Do not consider any of it is going to work by itself. You cannot do one thing and pin your hopes on that. Oh, they'll take it to court, they'll take it to the Supreme Court, it's going to cost a lot, but no, that'll get it, they'll get it because it's against the law, it's just against the law. We know it's against the law. They shouldn't be able to do this. Whatever the reasons, whether it's about property rights or whether it's about individual rights or whether it's about the brush laws or an injunction to do all that sort of stuff. Very good strategies, I agree. What we found in every real sense is the government is in bed with the courts to the largest degree. The courts aren't necessarily law. The government is writing laws all the time, changing them all the time. That's part of the tactic here. So that then the courts have to go with this. The Supreme Court can sort of go outside that sort of stuff, but largely, listen, apart from the fact of it is extremely expensive, it's also an extremely long process. The Royal Commission, another thing, it's actually a 2-year process. The guns will be gone by the time they've got that done. They probably will ignore the injunction unless there's other things happening. The other bit I'd touch on it in the Royal Commission. I believe they probably do want the Royal Commission actually. I think it's all a bit of a subterfuge that, no, don't want to do that, don't want to do that. What they do want to do with the Royal Commission is frame it so it looks at the place they want to look at and not the place they don't want to look at. So a Royal Commission isn't what you might think. A Royal Commission is about everything. A Royal Commission is something that is set up with a framing, so this is what we look at. We saw the same thing with the review over here. In Western Australia, they went to do a review, so it was all going to be, well, they're reviewing themselves, so what's the point of that? Yes. But 26,000 submissions, of a lot written with a lot of care and a lot of due diligence and a lot of details, all binned under misinformation. And they selected a very small few to do the pretense of something. So then they could say to the public afterwards, well, pretending to resist, actually then did it happen, talked to all these other things to make it happen, but ultimately ended up with a rubber stamp. So look, we reviewed it, full public review, and they said it was okay. We've decided it's okay. So it's this pretense of something set up with, oh no, she objects too much, to, oh, we'll accept it. Well, I think that's what's happening here also. And they will do it on anti-Semitism. They will put it up on anti-Semitism because that's what it'll be framed around. And then where it's gun laws and the government being complicit, or the government letting things happen, or the government dropping the ball, that won't really matter. We'll just focus on this little bit here, which actually will suit the division side of things and keep everyone on edge. And yet we did a full review on the Bondi massacre, and we determined that all the decisions we made were right. And it was actually this problem of anti-Semitism which actually caused the whole thing. That's what I think's in play. So it doesn't mean don't support the Royal Commission, don't support pushing for it, but understand it, but pushing for the right one, which should be about government competence, government complicity, government involvement, the problems of government, which is what we've actually got here. They're the one who are setting things up the way they are, whether it's the immigration, whether it's division, all those bits and pieces, they're up to this. And they are up to this, well, I should say they. The people who are controlling them are up to this. The politicians are largely useful idiots, not that intelligent, doing as they're told, and probably under the more subterfuge than you and I. But that is still, that's the place that we can attack. That's the place that we can hold to account and find what they're doing wrong. The best way to do that is do all these things together. All these things together. Positive advertising, in the way of various forms of our positive propaganda, the yes letters to your local member, all that sort of stuff, putting things forward, being respectful, being smart about it, combining, getting together with your groups and writing things up that actually make sense, where people can talk about properly, where you're putting pressure on them. The likes of e-petitions about the various things, putting them forward, getting them up, getting them across the House so they actually get to talk about them. They have to get X amount of signatures to get to that place. In any form of that sort of stuff, yes, good things. Getting together with groups and organisations and giving them more power. Yes, that's a good idea. Understand also that they be careful of the rhetoric. Politicians, going with the politicians, unless they're pledging things, so hold them to that account. And I would say that's the same for all the organisations, hold them to account. If they're not doing the right thing, if they're not really part of the fight, they're working behind the scenes things, then actually turn your focus on them for a little bit. Have 10,000 people telling that organisation, no, that's not okay. We need to change the head of that organisation, or we need to change this unless you do what we want to do. Organisations need to be, and same as our government, same as the rest of it, it needs pressure. We found over here that the protests, smartly done protests, did put a lot of pressure on things. We saw the changes in bits and pieces. There were only a few. There was, probably 1,500 people that showed up. It was still enough to do things. It didn't get support from the SSAA. It didn't get support from the dealers. It didn't get support from national support, that sort of stuff. So it didn't work well enough because there wasn't enough support from our industry, from the shooters. In that sort of level, that's something where, yes, the SSAA deliberately resisted that situation. So that's got to change. Hold them to account. That's a very, very important thing to go through and do. My thoughts are really the people who make the money out of the industry, and that would be the likes of the dealer network in what they can. They're struggling in places, I get it, but what they can. That would be the importers in what they could bring into this. The likes of the large organisations, SSAA is the only one that comes to mind. But those people there that make the money should be funding a certain amount of this and should be declaring what they're funding. They, I presume, are frightened that the police will judge them harshly. This is the end of firearms unless you do something. So going down screaming, or you're just happy to go quietly off into the night. Put some funding into that, fix some repairs. I would also say the biggest issue is division. We don't want that. The reason I've said some negative things about the SSAA, not so that you can hate them, no, so they can step up and we can get all on the same team. That's a very, very important thing that we do now. Get on the same team. Do as many things as you can. And yes, sacrifice for this. This really matters. It really, really matters. Anyway, I'm starting to I've lost track of where I'm going in that conversation to try and remember it all. But listen, that's the main thing I would say. I suppose it ends up with, if you're not doing something, if you're not for the cause, if you're not part of the cure, then you are part of the problem. And that actually means sitting still on every level. Even if you've joined this group and given $100 here and you're sitting still doing nothing else, I'm involved. Well, not really. And that's exactly what the government want. The government want you sitting still, being quiet, and then complying to look after yourself. That's all they actually want out of you. Because once they've got you there, they'll take the next bit. The next slice is coming. It's just around the corner. And they'll end up where you either give up or they legally take all your firearms away. That's the plan. Please stop thinking otherwise. And then for everyone else that goes, oh, I don't care about the firearms, why do you think they're taking the firearms? Why do you think they're taking the firearms? This is about you too. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for checking in. We'll catch you next time.